냥제 젬보서다 님이 정정는 뭐는 침보는 가자다 바크르 다른 감산도 실물도 돈바 특제잖라 기시험 차를 오늘 저를 쓰는 게 정건 자거 특제신로 일란만 지금 판조자라 소란데 공지 또 반복을 신지로
Let us begin our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury. Previously, we've studied on one should part from the negative influence and then associate oneself with the virtuous teacher. Also, in our last class, we've studied how a teacher should give the teachings of the Dharma. Whenever and if we have the opportunity to give the Dharma teaching, we should know how to give the Dharma teachings. We should know the way that we should make the aspiration, and while we give the Dharma teaching, what kind of faults that we should disassociate ourselves with, and what kind of merits that we can gain from giving Dharma teachings. Currently, we're going to study the 11th chapter where the audience, as the Dharma listener and the students, we listen to the Dharma teachings, and then what should we do as the appropriate and qualified audience? If we do not follow those, though that we may appear to listen to many classes, especially during the first half of the year, we would have more classes, and in the winter, we don't have that many classes, but since for various kinds of causes and conditions, we still have the opportunity to listen to the classes. For such reason, it would be best for us to listen to the Dharma teachings following the instructions in such a way our listening would generate great merits. If not, then listening to Dharma teachings is quite superficial. So let's look at the teaching. According to the textual outline today, it also has the brief explanation and then the extensive explanation. In the brief explanation, it says that then here I'm going to expound on the characteristics as the disciples that listen to the Dharma teaching. The next part talks about the three aspects of being a qualified student. That is the extensive explanation. The first one is merits and faults, and then the second is when to listen, and third one is the method. The first one of merits and faults also has three aspects. The first one is the general and then the extensive. So the brief says that one should eradicate all faults and listen to the Dharma teachings. And later we will talk about the 3 mistakes and 6 defilements as well as the 36 faults, which should be eradicated so that we can listen to the Dharma teaching. I believe many of you have already studied the words of my perfect teacher, and within that text we have also learned how to study the Dharma, the rules of listening to the Dharma, which included the three mistakes and the 6 defilements as well as the faults. So you should be probably quite clear about that. And for those of you who have not studied this, currently, we are going to cover the 36 types of faults that's associated to listening to the Dharma. The 3 mistakes that's covered over here is the reversed vessel, the leaking vessel, and defiled vessel. If you do not listen attentively, then you're simply like a reversed vessel. Whatever kind of vessel that we use in this world, if we were to put it upside down, then pour water and pour tea or even amrita into this particular vessel, not even one drop of those liquids will get in. For the same reason, at the time of listening to the Dharma, if your ears are not completely focused onto the Dharma teaching, though maybe sitting within the Sangha while listening to the Dharma, However, if one were to be drowsy and distracted and playing different kinds of games or fidgeting, all of those kinds of behaviors and actions would make you as the vessel that is turned upside down, because whatever kinds of teaching the teacher is giving you, the teacher is teaching, then because of your distractedness, because you're not focusing, then all of those nectar-like Dharma teachings won't get into your mind, because your mind is not focused onto the Dharma teaching, and then you will not be able to attain anything. This is the first type of mistake. The second one is a leaking vessel. As a leaking vessel, if someone were to pour any liquids into this vessel, there is no way for the vessel to sustain anything within it. It will just keep leaking out. For the same reason, though some of you may appear to be listening to the Dharma again and again, but there is no Dharma that can be remembered. Sometimes I would give the example that a brown bear, the brown bear usually at the time of digging for groundhog, every time the brown bear catch one, would sit on the groundhog and then continuously to dig for more. But then the first one would run away at the time of the second one's caught. So at the end, the bear won't be able to get any. Similarly, if we listen to the Dharma teaching but do not remember it, if we do not keep it in our hearts, then we would not be able to gain anything at all. If you really couldn't remember, then we should record it. We should write it in our notes. We should write it in our books. But in terms of writing in the books, in the textbooks, according to the Tibetan Buddhism, there are different ways of explaining it. Some stated that writing notes on the books is acceptable because Mipa Rinpoche also made lots of notes in the text and later was made into a compilation of his works. However, some also said that if you were to make notes on the textbook and then it is really defiling the textbooks, it is not respectful to the Dharma text. But I think whatever way it is, if the great masters and teachers used to make notes on the textbook, I don't think it's a great mistake. Rather, it is necessary for you to make notes so that you can remember. It is said that the palest ink is better than the best memory. So writing it is quite important. When I was writing the memoir, I was really grateful that I wrote lots of notes in my antique calendar. Otherwise, there would be no way for me to remember those kinds of incidents. If you have a leaky vessel and pour tea into it, there would be no tea that can be retained at the end of pouring. Similarly, even if the teacher tries his or her best to give you teachings, if you do not listen attentively, then you would not be able to remember anything. Nowadays, people would blame their retention of memory to their age. I noticed that lots of our young fellow practitioners over here would participate in the after-class discussion group and presentations, and I truly admire that. I think the seniors should not give up on your memory either. I understand that there is a bit of a difference in the ability of memory after 60 or 70, but if you were to try your best, you would still be able to remember. But if you can't remember anything and forget all about the teaching, that is the mistake of being a leaking vessel. The next one is the poisonous or the defiled vessel. At the time of listening to the Dharma, if we were to mix our defilements such as the afflictions such as greed, anger, and aggression and arrogance, then the Dharma that you listen to would not become merit. That is similar to the vessel that is tinted with poison and defiled with dirt, that would not bring us any happiness, that would not bring us any ease. So at the time of listening to the Dharma, we should not generate the mind of aggression, sadness, or pain. There was a story recorded in the sutra that once the king Prasanati went to the Buddha to receive the Dharma teaching. At that time, his citizens were extremely happy to receive the Dharma teaching from the Buddha and didn't pay attention to the king Prasanati. All of the citizens listened carefully to the Buddha's teaching. For such reason, King Prasanati felt angry for not being taken seriously, and then he, at the time of his generation of anger, the Buddha knew it through his miraculous penetration. And then the Buddha stopped giving the Dharma teachings. It is only later the king Prasanati went to the Buddha to request him to give Dharma teachings again. That's when the Buddha said that at the time of listening to the Dharma, if the mind were to be intrigued by or to be triggered by greed, anger, and arrogance, that is not appropriate. If your mind were to be filled with such kinds of defilement, it is better for you not to listen to it. And that is to point out his mind stream was not pure at the time of listening to the Dharma teaching. The Buddha would often say this in the sutras. He would say that you should listen carefully, then contemplate upon it. I will now give you the teaching upon it. Also, in the words of my perfect sutra, there are the extensive explanation. It means that for those people with arrogance, those without faith to the Dharma nor to the teacher do not have any longing to receive the Dharma, rather get extremely distracted, also get drowsy at the time of listening to the teaching, and sometimes even irritation at the time of listening to the Dharma teaching. Those are the 6 types of faults that's associated. In the next part, we will talk about the 36 types of faults and the 36 types of merits. When we study these 36 faults and demerits, I will give teachings according to the auto-commentary of Wish Fulfilling Treasury. While I give you the teachings on the 36 faults and 36 merits, I would like you to make a checklist for yourself and find what kind of faults that you have at this point. Also, what kinds of merits that you have. So you can make a checklist and you can mark up what you have and what you don't have. There are 72 merits and faults altogether. And then you can make a comparison whether you have more merits or more faults. If you have more merits, as a Dharma listener, Dharma student, you're doing pretty well. If you have more faults, then you need to make the resolve to make some changes. If you do not change upon hearing the Dharma, then what's the point of listening to the Dharma? There are people who would listen to the teachings but not making changes. When we were at school, we would carry out our activities and our behaviors has to be bound to the student's manual. There are things that we can do and things we can't do that's written in the manual. And then we would have to follow those requirements. But of course, there are the students that doesn't matter how much is written in the student manual and how clear they are, they would not follow anyhow. This is really your own own personality, your own characteristics. As being a human being, we need to follow some rules, and we need to change our habitual tendencies. But we should try our best to follow these rules that's stated so that we can listen to the Dharma properly. As mundane beings, we can't be all perfect, but at least you should get to know yourself through making a checklist of the merits and of the faults. Later on, the Khenpos and Khenmos could also make a test question, an exam question, asking how many faults and how many merits that your disciples would have. If we were to only study the words, then they're really easy. However, we need to reflect upon ourselves. Now, let's look at the extensive explanation, which has two aspects. The first one is the 36 types of merits. The first one is the 36 faults and then the 36 merits. Now let's look at the shloka. Over here it says that the 6 Mara activities, including the disrespect, the 6 activities of obstacles, including arrogance, the 6 activities of abandoning the Dharma, including pretentiousness, the 6 activities of destruction, including seeking for wealth, the 6 activities of perversion, including for seeking for benefits, the 6 activities of treading onto the wrong path, including practicing the heretics. Those are the 36 faults that should be eradicated associated with listening to the Dharma. As someone seeking for studying the Dharma, we need to remember this and we need to reflect upon ourselves and understand if we have any of those. According to the text of the Treasury Trove of Pith Instructions, also composed by Longchenpa, he also composed in the same way, the 6 dharmas within one verse and 6 dharmas, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but a majority of the verses were 6 by 6, and over here it's 36. Let's look at it, whether you have any of those 6 Mara activities. The first one is laziness, distracted and being lazy. If you have that, then you should take this particular trait of personality or trait of faults off your list. In terms of laziness, according to Mahaprajna Paramita, it states that the dark clouds of laziness would cover up the bright wisdom. Now, this is the third one. If one do not generate any faith towards the correct Dharma or to the teacher that gives the Dharma teaching. Some people may ask, well, I do have faith to the Dharma, but I don't really have faith to some of the Dharma teachers. Then what should I do? Then for that one, you should probably click a neutral. Otherwise, but don't click neutral on all of them. Otherwise, you won't have a clear view of yourself. Or another way is for you to make the observation whether you have more faith or less faith, and then you can take that off. The next one is not respecting nor prostrating to the virtuous teacher. The next one is whether your view is constantly in sync with the Dharma. Are you constantly think about bodhicitta, renunciation? This is called in sync with the Dharma. If you only pay attention to this lifetime and disregard with the causes and durations, if you disregard karma but only think about to earn money in this lifetime, to get happiness for this lifetime, but don't care about karma and the future lifetimes and have no fear to karma, then that is considered as the Mara's activity. The second group is the 6 obstacles. If one were to be possessed by madness, then one would get extremely arrogant. The demeanor would also present that kind of arrogance. However, the arrogant ones are quite pitiful because they have no idea that they are arrogant. They don't know that they have the mind of arrogance at all. The second one is out of karmic obscurations and to abandon the Dharma teachings. They are the ones that has such deep karmic obscurations that do not want to receive any Dharma teachings. And the third one is to seek for the teachings of materialistic view. They would not seek for the Dharma teachings, but would receive teachings from the ones that follows the materialistic and utilitarian view. Then the fourth one is not interested in the Bodhisattva's treasure trove of Dharma, which means not interested in the Mahayana teachings at all. That is definitely an obstacle. The sixth one is that to generate a wrong view to the Dharma. Those are the 6 obstacles. If you were to have obstacles in listening to the Dharma, then obviously you will encounter obstacles onto your path of practice as well. If your mind stream were to have these obstacles, then you would not be able to generate faith to the Dharma, to the teacher, but would be only interested in the mundane, in the worldly Dharma, and not interested in the Mahayana. So this could be considered as having lots of karmic obscurations. And then the third category is that the 6 activities associated with abandoning the Dharma. The first one is if one were to be pretentious, if one to be rather quite deceitful, rather to deceive others and even oneself. The second one is out of arrogance and pride for oneself, but not respect the teacher. Because of arrogance, maybe people would not pay any respect to the teacher, and we can see that quite clearly through their attitude. And the third one is out of doubts, not respecting the correct Dharma. The fourth one is to use pretentiousness and use the pretended characteristic to lead a livelihood. They're the ones that do not respect their parents and do not respect the temples and acharyas and have quite coarse physical presence and quite coarse mind, often makes all kinds of quarrels and conflicts. Those are the signs for someone being coarse and not gentle at all. And then it is easy for these kinds of people to give up on Dharma, to abandon Dharma. So these 6, you should also compare yourself and see if you have any of those. The next one is distractions. Those are the 6 faults associated to being distracted. The first one is to have a great numbers of chores. Chores in the worldly sense. If one were to have lots of worldly chores and lots of distractions in the worldly sense, but not have any time to practice on liberation, but rather would spend lots of time in the worldly chores and in gaining benefits and wealth, and any little spare time they would have, they would be fidgeting on their cell phones. I know a Lama who's similar to that description. He would hold on to his cell phone, sometimes calling and sometimes texting and so on and so forth. And it really feels that he's quite fettered to benefits and wealth. It seems that there are lots of such associated chores. On top of that, there's the frivolous and pointless speech. There are the kind of people who would keep on those dreadful naggings and those idle speech, which seems endless. The next one is having lots of negative companions, and then have lots of wrong views, erroneous views, and would have rather very petty thoughts. thoughts, and their thoughts would skip from here and to there, but they would not have any of those kindness or faith thoughts, even if for an instant a little bit of renunciation or bodhicitta or compassion were to generate, but it would not last for a few minutes, but the majority of time they would spend in the petty thoughts. The next one is because of their negative karma, there's a naturally calling for illness. All of a sudden they have headache and then footache and then stomachache and so on and so forth. Such kinds of people are simply enduring the vicious karmic debt that appears in front of them. It is very much related to distraction. So now we've finished the fourth category. Then now the fifth category. The fifth category talks about the perversions. There are 6 faults associated to it. It says that if one were to not being grateful, rather being deceiving, do not have the mind of gratefulness to people who had paid kindness to them, rather would deceive those ones. The second fault would be hold on to benefits and offerings, simply engaging in practice out of greed. This kind of practitioner is simply getting further and further from the path of the noble ones, because if one were to hold on to the benefits and fame from the others to engage into, that's a reason for them to engage into practice. It is for sure that this person is not a good practitioner. Then the next one is to have jealousy, also quite miserly at the times of benefiting others. The fourth one is not to contemplate onto the merits of giving the Dharma teachings, rather would be perverted in expounding the Dharma teachings. Sometimes one would have all kinds of perverted views about whether one is correct or wrong, or would find faults in the Dharma teachers. The fifth one is to seek and rely on the vice spiritual teacher. And then the sixth one is only seeking for the dualistic thoughts, the worldly dualistic thoughts, but not seeking for merits. If one were to only seek for the dualistic worldly thoughts, but not seek for merits, then one would not be able to succeed in anything. In fact, merits are so important. That is why we practice mindful practice. That is why we engage in all kinds of virtuous deeds. Because without merits, without the cultivation of such, you won't even have time to engage in practice. If you do not have merits, you would not even have the opportunity to rely on spiritual teacher. If you do not have merits, you would generate wrong views and even slander, even to part ways from the virtuous spiritual teacher. If you do not have merits, you probably even don't have time to engage in retreat for a few days. So without merits, it could be quite defeating to engage in any kinds of practice activities. Therefore, according to our own capacity, we need to carry out virtuous activities whenever possible and make aspiration as well as dedicate merit. The sixth one is the wrong ways, the wrong path. There are the 6 faults associated as well. The first one is not seeking for the treasure trove of Bodhi, rather to seek for the heretics and seek for the miraculous penetrations. The second one is to seek for the teachings of the worldly, but not seeking for the teaching of liberation. That is to say, nowadays there are people who only would study of the Confucius and the Mencius teachings, or to study those so-called chicken soup articles, but not drawn to the teachings that would lead to liberation. In fact, at the time of seeking for Dharma teachings, I think there are times that we do need to seek for other kinds of knowledge while living in this world, but we need to remind ourselves that we are the ones that seeks for liberation ultimately. In history, I think we studied the story of Emperor Liang Wu. At the time when he was really busy with the reigning of the country, he had to deal with lots of the political issues, but he would read books at all times. Sometimes he would carry his sutras and texts and engage in practice whenever there's a possibility. Similarly, in the world, there are people that has lots of work, such as our staff members over here. Though they're quite busy, but whenever they get time, they would spend the time in memorizing texts or engage in the Dharma practices. But also, there are the examples, the negative examples, that they do not enjoy the Dharma teaching, do not enjoy reading books. It is similar to place grass in front of a dog. They're not interested in it. So the sentient beings in this world, they're simply being influenced by their previous karma. There are the ones that had accumulated a great deal of virtuous karma, then they can succeed in everything and they will be really happy. And the ones in the vice, then they would have to go through lots of suffering. Sometimes even if they were to encounter some wonderful opportunities of encountering virtuous teacher and receive the Dharma, but because of their negative karma, they would then lose those opportunities and continuously to drown in the ocean of samsara and ocean of suffering. The third one is to only seek for the studies of words and languages, but not seeking for liberation. That refers to the kind of people only likes to study words, the beautiful and flowery poetic words, but not seeking for liberation. There are the kinds of Dharma teachers that would really enjoy some worldly articles, but not interested in the inner science of Mahayana. On top of that, there are the ones that only seeks for the Shravaka and Pratika's teachings, but not seeking for the Mahayana Bodhisattvayana's Dharma teachings. The fifth one is not interested to use skillful means to lead the others onto the path of liberation. Rather, they would only seek to extinguish their own afflictions. And the next one is not seeking for the true spiritual teacher, rather only interested in the Vidya teachings, the worldly science, such as craftsmanship and the medicine and so on, but not interested in finding the true spiritual teacher that would lead onto the way of transcending or lead onto the way of liberation. These are the 36 faults. Now, let's look at your own lists and see how many of the 36 that you've got. Did you make a checklist?
多少？什么？多少个？36个里面，2条半是什么意思？一半一半，这是一个大擦边球，就是这不是什么，2条半是什么意思？那现在怎么样的？现在这些36个都没有是吧？这样是吧？其他都做到了，哇！
Impressive. One Sangha member over here stated that he only checked off 1 out of the 36. That's great. Let's look at the meritorious aspects. Carefully and respectfully listening to the Dharma teachings, 6 keys including viewing as jewels, 6 ascetic practices such as patience, 6 changelessness, including extensive listening, 6 actions to be adapted, including compassion, 6 essentials, including discernment, 6 seeks, including seeking for the genuine Dharma. These are the 36 merits of listening to the Dharma. Now let's look at the explanations. At this time of listening to the Dharma, one should be very attentive, also extremely respectful. The 36 merits or the 36 kinds of virtuous aspects of listening to the Dharma should be applied. And these 36 are also divided into 6 categories. Let's look at the first category of the 6 qualities. The first one is the keys. According to the sutra requested by Subahu, it states that one should visualize the guru as the treasure trove. All the treasures and jewels are well endowed within the guru. According to the sutras also, it states that one should have the visualization or have the contemplation of seeking for the Dharma just as seeking for jewels, seeking for wish-fulfilling jewels. So the first out of the first category is to visualize the teacher as the treasure trove. The second one is to visualize the correct Dharma as the wish-fulfilling jewel. It is quite rare for us to encounter the wish-fulfilling jewel within the treasure trove. So for such reason, it is quite rare that we've accumulated the merits to listen to the Dharma teachings. That's the second. The third one is to uphold the contemplation that the correct Dharma is the most essential. We should constantly uphold and contemplate upon the Dharma. That is the most important. At the time of study, contemplation, and practice, the genuine Dharma is the most essential, maybe because I've spent my life in such a way. I really feel that all the worldly affairs are not as important. It is only that studying the Dharma is the key and the most essential for our this lifetime and the future lifetimes. The next one is that one should contemplate in such a way that encountering the correct Dharma and having the opportunity to delve into the further exploration of the correct Dharma is extremely rare, even for 100 lifetimes. The opportunity of delve into the contemplation and the study of the correct Dharma is quite difficult to gain. And nowadays, we have the opportunity to contemplate, to study, to reflect upon the correct Dharma, also to engage in debates and explorations of the Mahayana teaching. These kinds of opportunities that we have nowadays is very difficult to gain. It is hard to say if we'll have that opportunity in our future lives, even for hundreds of our future lives. Therefore, each of us should contemplate upon the rarity of this opportunity. Now we have this opportunity. In the recent years, we have this opportunity, but after 10 years and 20 years, would we still have this opportunity? That is very difficult to say. That is very difficult to guarantee. So we should not give up this opportunity, and we should not give up the nectar-like Dharma, rather to seek for the mundane that is like the poison. If one were to forsake the nectar but take the poison, if one were to, that is just like if one were to forsake the Mahayana and uptake the mundane, that is quite pitiful. On top of that, there are people that would slander and create a negative karma because of such supreme object that is the Mahayana Dharma teaching. So we need to contemplate upon Dharma because that would be the most meaningful to our lifetime. That is the most meaningful thing that we have in this lifetime. These are the 6 keys. And then the next one talks about the 6 kinds of ascetic practice. And the first one is patience. According to the sutra requested by Subahu, it also says that the virtuous spiritual teachers, in order to receive the Dharma teachings, would endure all kinds of cruciating heat or coldness. So sometimes the rain or the hot weather, and sometimes those kinds of conditions is really nothing, because the virtuous teachers would endure anything for the Dharma, to receive the Dharma. It is really nothing for us to endure some hunger or thirst or some of the afflictions in order to receive the correct Dharma teaching. Thirst and hunger is really nothing. I think our fellow practitioners indeed have that spirit of enduring all kinds of difficulties to study the Dharma. For example, some of you would have to get up really early and without even having breakfast would blow the conch to signify the beginning of the class. Also, since we have the after-class discussion group, it would get very late for you to return home. And there's the snow, there's the storm, and sometimes heavy rain, sometimes vicious dogs, and sometimes non-humans, Ashuras, and so on and so forth. The practitioners over here indeed would go through those kinds of difficulties and still attend the Dharma classes. Then when we reflect back onto the great masters of the past, they would travel thousands of miles and mountains and rivers and then seek for the Dharma despite the possibilities of encountering bandits and poisonous snake and so on and so forth. I think we can uptake also the same spirit to study the Dharma. Everyone here, I think majority of you are very humble at the time of receiving the Dharma, and if you can do so, if you can truly try your best to receive the Dharma, then after a few decades, this period of time would become a really beautiful memory of yours. All of those aesthetic practices of during the Dharma practices or Dharma learning journey are quite simple. This kind of life is quite simple, and at the time of discussing the Dharma teachings with your fellow Vajrasangha is also quite joyful. On top of that, the ascetic practices that we would engage during the time of searching for the Dharma can be considered as a really simple way of living our lives, because we are discussing all kinds of Dharma teachings with our fellow Sangha members, and such kinds of simple and happy things can be difficult to gain. Now, the next one is to endure all kinds of difficulties, physical difficulties and tiresomeness. If one were to endure all kinds of difficulties and give up the provisions in order to seek for the Dharma and to follow the teacher, to give up whatever you would consider as precious, and then would seek for the Dharma, that is the fifth one. And then the sixth one is, in order to seek for the Dharma, one would even give up on the life that one cherishes. That is also quite an important resolve. The next category, the third category, is one should wear the armor of changelessness. It is also said in the sutra that armor cannot be harmed by short spears. So the first one is that one should be changeless in terms of accumulating the extensive listening, and the second one is that one should be changeless in terms of extensive upholding. The third one is one should be changeless in terms of understanding the Dharma teaching. The fourth one is one should be changeless in terms of practicing the Dharma teaching. The fifth one is in terms of relying on the Dharma and relying on the teacher should be changeless. The sixthness is one should be changeless in terms of paying respect and serve the teacher and to the Dharma. The armor of changelessness should be applied at the time of paying respect to the Dharma and to the teacher. These are the six of the changelessness, and then the fourth category of the six qualities are having the discernment. The first one is knowing all the virtuous roots, the virtuous qualities. After knowing all the virtuous roots, knowing the virtuous roots refers to discern what is virtuous and what is vice. So you should know what is virtuous and what is vice first, and then after knowing that, one should properly engage in practice of the Dharma. In such a way, the merit would be great. And then the third one is generating great compassion to the sentient beings. And then the fourth one is upholding the wondrous Dharma completely. At all times, one should not give up on the wondrous Dharma. The fifth one is not eradicating the disposition of the three jewels. We should continuously propagate and spread the Dharma teachings to then further the disposition of the three jewels. We should effort continuously to spread the Dharma teachings. And we need to contemplate, after my era ends, what would the Dharma be like if I do not spread the Dharma in my time, in such a way that it would be the eradication of the jewel of the Buddha, the jewel of the Dharma, and the jewel of Sangha. So just like how the worldly beings would say that we need to continue the bloodline of the family, the Mahayana practitioners need to continue the Dharma line of the Buddha family. Though that we don't have the true bloodlines, and the worldly people would consider that is not paying filial piety to the family, but really what's the point of having children if they don't listen to you, if things were to happen or things like that. But what's really crucial is to pass down the genuine Dharma teaching as a Mahayana disciple. The sixth category is to mature all the sentient beings, because the Mahayana Dharma teaching makes the great emphasis on benefiting sentient beings. If we do not benefit and mature the sentient beings' capacity to receive the Dharma, then we ourselves were to eradicate afflictions or not is really not that necessary or not that important. This is the fourth. Now the fifth out of the sixth is the necessity of engaging the Dharma. Over here in the sutra that's requested by Kashyapa, it says that one should listen and know the differences of the Dharma. At the time of listening, we need to know what can be practiced and what can't, what we shouldn't practice. So if we understand that, we need to know what to practice and what not to practice. We need to engage in the practice of the virtue and eradicate the kinds of practice of the non-virtue. Over here, our reputation is not bad. The majority of you would engage in the practice of mantra chanting or meditation. Most of the time, you're very quiet and would not have all kinds of distractions, such as playing TikTok and so on. Anyhow, that's the third one. Then the fourth one is to expound the necessity of attaining realization, and the fifth one is the necessity of engaging the practice of wisdom, and the sixth one is eradicate all kinds of doubts that comes from the four directions. This is quite essential because over here we have lots of people coming from different walks of life, and you're at the time when you gathered over here, the kinds of doubts would also come from different walks of life, and there would be lots of doubts accumulated. But that is okay. It is stated in both Zen Buddhism as well as the Vajrayana that at the time or before entering into Samadhi, you were a mundane one, and at the time of exiting the Samadhi, you've already became a noble one. Similarly, at the time of entering into Larangar, you probably brought lots of doubts and you entered Larangar as a mundane one, but at the time of leaving Larangar, you have already carried a great deal of the jewels of wisdom and become a noble one, and spreading the treasure like Dharma teachings at wherever you are from or wherever you would go. Sometimes I would contemplate, we have so many people here and many of you have great wisdom. As long as you would maintain pure precepts, and then you should be able to propagate the Dharma teachings, especially if you've accumulated, or especially if you've given rise to great wisdom and have great aspiration and the auspicious connections and conditions, then you would definitely be able to spread the Dharma teachings. Even if you do not have such causes and conditions in this lifetime, we should make the aspiration that eventually one day we will be able to spread the wondrous Dharma teaching to the sentient beings and benefit the sentient beings. Now the sixth, this one is expounded in the Avatamsaka Sutra. The first one is seeking for the Dharma without deception. The second one is to seek for the Dharma for the benefit of sentient beings, but not for one's own profit. The third one is not seeking for any wealth or any fame for oneself, but seeks for the Dharma in order to eradicate the afflictions of the sentient beings. The fourth one is not using any of the rude or coarse actions to seek for wisdom. Then one over here remembers this story of a disciple at once knocks on the door of Venerable Atisha and says, "Hey, Atisha, give me a pith instruction." And then Atisha was extremely unhappy and said, "Well, if you want to seek for the pith instruction, you need to know that the teaching is sought by veneration and not arrogance. So we need to remember at the time of receiving the Dharma teaching is just we should be merged, or we should embody the Dharma teaching just like how a piece of butter would melt into porridge. When one truly embodies the Dharma, we can definitely see it. So this is quite essential to truly embody and manifest the Dharma just as the butter melts into the porridge. Now the sixth one is to seek for the Dharma that is taught by the perfect Buddha without any arrogance or any greed. These are the 36 types of virtuous qualities. Now look at your own checklist. How many of you finished your own checklists?
应该还可以是吧？大概有多少个36个功德当中？啊，不能说全有，但是基本上还可以。可以，基本上都可以是吧？行，那很好，那我都放心了啊。你看人家南宗这边都是2个都是这边的报告的，女宗那边有没有？啊？什么有？国师有。功德。哦。多少功德？啊？最少35个。好嘛。
Now the next one is on when to listen. Previously, we covered on the merits and virtuous qualities of listening to the Dharma. And I think we need to apply these checklists to our listening of the Dharma. Look at what kinds of negative qualities and positive qualities that we have. We should try to eradicate of the negative and try to have more and more of the meritorious qualities of listening to the Dharma. If we can do so, then in the future, we're simply creating more of the auspicious connections to listen to the Dharma in the future times. If we were to have too much of the mistakes and the negative qualities of listening to the Dharma, then in the future times, it would be hard to say if we'll have the opportunity to listen to the Dharma. Now, the next one is on when to seek and when to listen to the Dharma. At the time of listening to the Dharma, we need to listen to the Dharma in front of a virtuous spiritual teacher. At the time of listening to the Dharma, we need to know that at the time of having afflictions is the best time to apply the Dharma to the afflictions, and those are the best time to truly embody the Dharma. So the best opportunity for you to apply the Dharma is when you have afflictions. According to Venerable Atisha, he stated that whether the Dharma can become the antidote for your affliction is the key point to differentiate whether the Dharma is the true Dharma, because it is only when the Dharma can treat and become an antidote to your affliction, it is the true Dharma. In order to truly apply the Dharma when you have afflictions has a few keys. The first key is that you have to have the eagerness to apply it. The second one is that when your age is still young, it is not when you're already confused at the time when you're too old and the seniority had kicked in. at that time of seeking for the Dharma might not be as good as when you're young, because the channel and the bindu in the body, the wind in the body has already waned. The memory is probably not as good, and your mind is not as clear. For that reason, it is the best when you're still young and when you're still physically strong and have good memories. At that time, if you have the opportunity to receive the Dharma teachings that is as vast as the oceans, it would be the best for you to receive the Dharma teachings of the Sutrayana, of the Vajrayana, and it would be the best for you to create the causes and conditions to receive the Dharma. In terms of the time of listening to the Dharma, it is stated that it is essential to receive the Dharma from the beginning to the end. It is essential to receive the Dharma from each of the stage of the practice of the Dharma, because at the beginning, when you first took refuge, you need to understand the various kinds of virtuous qualities as well as the faults associated with samsara and the virtuous qualities associated with nirvana. So you need to know how to discern those qualities. And then the next one is at the middle stage, when you're working on your mind stream. At that time, we are probably still quite unclear about various kinds of subtleties of Dharma. That's when you need to continuously to listen to the Dharma. At the time of practicing the Dharma, to contemplate the Dharma, it is essential to listen to the Dharma first so that you can apply the key instructions into your practice, to engage in retreats, to engage in whatever kinds of Dharma practices you would engage in every day. Also, at the time of when your virtuous mind has been more stable and you feel that there are some progressions, or when you're quite liberated from the afflictions already, when you don't have much afflictions, you still need to listen to the Dharma, because at that time you would occasionally still have some doubts and confusions and may still hold on to certain of the elaborations, and we need to learn to eradicate them and to have reminders. That is why we need to listen to the Dharma all the way from the very beginning to the end, when you or to the stage where you've already developed some of the signs of progression. Nowadays, we have the technology that could be very helpful. You can carry USB that has lots of the Sutrayana and Mantrayana teachings within, in such a way you don't necessarily have to stay with the teacher, or if the teacher is not around you at all times, you can still listen to the Dharma teachings with the right mindfulness. It is essential to know that the study should be continuous all the way from beginning to the end. We always need to long to receive and listen to the Dharma teachings, unlike some people would think that at the time of attaining Buddhahood, I would no longer need to listen to the Dharma teachings. That is not true. It is because on one hand, we need to follow the instructions of the great masters that would give the instructions based on their actual realization and actual insights. On the other, by listening to the Dharma, our mind stream, the progressions in our mind stream, the insight within our mind stream will further elevate, and it is quite meaningful to further deepen your realization. That is why the great noble ones and the great senior practitioners would pay great attention to listening to the Dharma. In the later time of their practices, and some of the senior practitioners would still long for the teachings from virtuous teachers. Compared to those great practitioners, some of you would listen to one or two sets of dharmas and then would feel that's sufficient, and then engage in practice in a secluded area. I think in such a way it may not be enough. Those dharma teachings may not be enough, and your your actual practice may not end well, because there are so many wrong ways, so many sidetracks that's associated with actual practice. If you do not listen to the Dharma teaching, you could fall into such dangers of falling into sidetracks. So some of you may appear to engage in the actual secluded practice and retreats, but it is hard to say whether your mind stream had made progressions. And that is why over here it says that the best time of listening to the Dharma, rather the best opportunity to listen to the Dharma, is when you could truly embody the Dharma and work on your affliction, to apply the Dharma as an antidote onto your affliction. That is why I think that Larangar would grant great blessings, because over here you have all the opportunities to listen to the Dharma, because everyone else is. There is such an atmosphere to do so. Whenever we listen to the Dharma teachings, we need to be aware that this is such a wonderful opportunity. After you part from here, it's hard to say you will still have the same opportunity. At the time of listening to the Dharma, you need to, it provides such a function of reminding you the function of Dharma. It provides you the opportunity for you to work with your afflictions, and provides you the opportunity to make further progress with your own practice. So I hope that people over here would be able to apply the teachings to afflictions, just as how Long Chenpa over here mentioned. As mundane beings, of course, we have afflictions, but to listen to the Dharma is to provide you opportunity to work with afflictions, to tame your own mind stream. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it also says that the virtuous one whom, upon hearing the Dharma teaching, would swiftly attain the perfect enlightenment. So that is why we need to listen to all kinds of Dharma teachings, the ocean-like Dharma teachings, that is the Prajna Paramita, the emptiness teachings from the Mahayana teachings, if you want to attain liberation, that is. If you stayed here for over 2 decades, though you may not be a Khenpo or Khenmo right now, but if your longingness to listen to the Dharma is still not decreased, if you're still willing to listen, then your days over here is still meaningful. Though some of you may think that you probably won't have opportunity to propagate the Dharma or to benefit sentient beings, but at least listening to the Dharma has planted the seed of liberation, and the power of such seed has been elevated every day. On the other hand, after listening to the Dharma, you have already purified your mind stream and had lots of happiness and without any kinds of defilements. There are such unfathomable great functions to listening to the Dharma. After finished listening the wish-fulfilling treasury, I believe there are all kinds of changes that can be applied to everyone's mind stream, and such kinds of changes are not temporary. They are rather complete changes, and that is why listening to the Dharma is extremely meaningful. When it comes to the translation aspect, I personally feel that I myself, after reading it and studying it, I gained great benefits. But at the time of engaging in translation, it is a great ascetic practice. I had to endure lots of hardship to engage in the actual translation. But I think I have tried my very best to provide the wealth of wisdom to all of you. And if one of you can truly make any changes to your own mind stream, that would be something I would be extremely delighted. I know that many of the practitioners here are young and have good memories and have lots of wisdom, and for that I truly rejoice. And some of you, it seems that maybe because of your past negative karma, you maybe cannot remember as well, nor to have as much wisdom. I would still encourage you to listen attentively so that the Dharma can touch your heart, and there would be a change in your mind stream as well, rather than thinking in a negative way that please let the Dharma class to end, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I need to go home. Instead of that, you should carry rather a sense of longingness and eagerness to the Dharma, with great passion to receive the Dharma, with a great sense of longing to receive the Dharma. In such a way, the power of blessings would be very different. Unlike that, if you were to have very little to none of the eagerness to receive the Dharma, then the imprint of the Dharma would be rather also nothing to little to none, and probably won't be imprinted in your mind stream as well. So at the time of the study, I'm sure out of 100 people, there would be 100 different results based on their different kinds of intentions. That is why I ask of you to make the checklist out of the 72 positive and negative qualities of listening to the Dharmas. Do not be like a rock that's placed into the water. After you fish out the rock, your mind stream is still not moist. In that way, it is not meaningless. I so encourage you to listen attentively. Let's stop here.